All right, here we go. We're nailing it. We're going to get it right this time.
Hi now, I'm Phil.
And I'm Carly.
And welcome to our review and first impressions of the old but new CATAN Scenario Helpers.
Helpers first came out in 2010, where it was used as a scenario for base and seafarers, seen as a way to make those games just a tiny bit more strategic. It then got a re-release in 2020 when it was included as part of the 25th anniversary edition of CATAN, as seen right here. And then in 2022, it got a total facelift. New characters, new designs, even a couple of new rules just to spice things up a little bit.
In front of us here we have the new helpers and the old helpers, so we can see how they've changed over the years for better or for worse.
We also have the corresponding C&K progress card, because I've kind of always thought of helpers as like a stepping stone to cities and knights. C&K 1.5, if you will. It's perfect if it's like midnight on a Friday night and you don't have time to squeeze in another game of C&K. Just crack out base with helpers.
So before we talk about the new cards, let's jump into how we use the helpers in a game of CATAN. In this edition of the Helper scenario, there are now 12 new CATAN residents already in waiting to lead you to victory. Each helper has a sun side and a moon side. And on each card, there's the helper's name, their power move description, a number, and a when to play icon. When your CATAN board is all set up and you've decided who's going first, helper number 1, Asla, goes to player 1. Helper number 2, Yngvi, goes to player 2, and so on until each player has a helper. Shuffle all the remaining helpers and randomly pick as many additional helpers as there are players. Place the additional helpers next to the board and remove the unselected helpers from the game. These will not be used. The when to play icon indicates when you can play your helper. The 1x means you can only play your helper once on your turn. The dice means you can play your helper immediately after any production is complete. Depending on which side your helper is facing up before you use their power move, you have one or two options. If your helper is sun side up, you can either choose to swap them with an additional helper on the side of the board, or you can keep them. If you decide to keep them, you must flip your helper from the sun side up to the moon side up. If your helper is moon side up, you must swap them with one of the additional helpers on the side of the board. Remember, you can never play a helper on the turn you received it. So that's how you play helpers. Now let's meet the helpers.
First up is Asla. Forced trade. Choose one resource type and request it from up to 2 players, one after the other. For each resource received, give one back of your choice. So Asla is the new version of Nasir, where the only real rule change that they specify in writing is that you have to take from 2 players, one after the other. Just clarifying it. And it's also kind of a variant of Commercial Harbour. Like we were saying earlier, Helpers is a little bit like C&K Junior.
Card number 2, Yngvi, makeshift road building. When building a road, you may substitute 1 lumber or 1 brick with any one other resource of your choice. So Yngvi is the new William, and Yngvi is a great starting card to have because you've placed 2nd, 3rd and 4th have already placed after you, which means there's a good chance that they might have blocked off your settlement or a road where some of you might want it to go. So by having a makeshift road in hand, it's a great way of getting yourself out of that blocked off area that you're in.
Or you're in a position where you're like competing to 2 roads going this way, and you need to secure it that way. And I feel like whenever that happens, the 3rd or 4th player who have placed both of their settlements at that point, their second one has always gone in a wood or a brick. So this allows you to swoop in as the second player going before them and nab that space before they get the chance to. Number 3, Hilda, resource compensation. If any production roll is not a 7 and you receive no resources, take any 1 resource card off your choice before any other helper card is used. So Hilda is the new version of Marianne. She goes to the 3rd starting player, and let's be real, she is by far the best helper at the very least of the top 4. Hilda's power is the same as when you spend your 3rd set of paper in C&K to get something for nothing. Explained expertly by myself just there. And it's by far the most beneficial progress development in C&K, or at least it's the one we're all kind of gunning for.
Yeah.
But no, Marianne / Hilda, my favourite of the starting hands. And also you've said many times before that 3rd is your favourite starting position.
Yeah, definitely. In a normal game, starting 3rd is best. Well, I think I like it. But then also, if you had Hilda and the first 2 rolls have been something you don't have, well, then you're still picking up something. So on your turn, you could have 5 cards in hand already. Mm-hmm. Even if you roll a 7, you're getting your 6th if you roll. So it's a great card to use.
It's also the one that I feel the other players track.
Yes.
More so than
big time.
Oh, have you used Have you used Hilda? Okay, we'll flip it and put it back.
Yes, exactly. Card number 4, Hugni. Move a road. You may remove one of your end roads and place it in another location following normal placement rules. So another great card to start with to get you out of a bind.
For the same reasons you were talking about with Ingvi, if you do get screwed over and you have nowhere to build, just lob it off.
Exactly.
And throw that road somewhere else.
And Hugni is the new Lewis, and then also similar to the Diplomat card in C&K. Now, the only difference between Diplomat and that is that Diplomat you can move someone else's road.
It's offensive as well.
Yes, Hugni is just moving your road, but same again.
Diplomat being the Guido card, as we are now calling it. Card number 5, Thorolf, aka Jon Snow. Protection from the 7. When any 7 is rolled, you must immediately use this advantage. If you have more than 7 resources, do not lose any. Otherwise, take any one resource off your choice. This might be the only compulsory helper card. If a 7's rolled and you've got more than 7, you cannot actively choose to ditch half of your hand. I suppose it's that thing you can't play to ruin yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Pretty good. As we're past the opening 4, official rules now dictate that Thorolf may not even be in your game.
Yeah, Thorolf, that's right.
None of these cards may be in your game. There is a variant, though, where you can play with all 12 helpers, which is how I have played it for years.
And Thorolf being the new Sean as well, if you used the old ones. And pretty much no difference between. Just a new version of Sean. Card number 6, Diarra. Development card choice. When buying a development card, you may substitute one resource with any one other resource of your choice. Choose your development card from the top 3 cards of the deck, then reshuffle the deck. So this is the new Candemir, and I think this is by far the best card in the deck.
Disagree. We already agreed that Hilda was the best card in the deck.
Well, Hilda's the best card to start with, but definitely Diarra is the most powerful card. To be able to substitute a resource to buy a dev card and pick the dev card, like that seems like it should be 2 different cards. Like I think it's the only card that has 2 parts to it, both parts being very powerful.
That's fair.
So like it's a very dangerously broken card. It's the most powerful card. It's the most powerful card for sure. When we play, it's always the one that's sought after. When it's on the table.
I will say the only downside I find to this redesign is that I no longer get to sing Alexander Candemir whenever Diarra is played, but it's fine. I can still get my kicks playing Rivals. Number 7, Ryan. Take card from leader. During your trade and build phase, you may look at the resource cards of one opponent who has more victory points than you and take one off your choice. Ryan is the new version of Hild, not to be confused with Hilda from the current iteration of Helpers. But also, like I said, if you played C&K, this is super similar to Master Merchant. And I'd also like to take a moment now that we're on Ryan to say that, like, do you think all of the new Helpers are slightly hotter than the old ones? Is it just me?
Maybe with the exception of Hugni, who looks like he's just spent too many years in the forest by himself.
I mean, yeah, Hugni is definitely an advert for staying sun safe while outside. I digress. Hilda, Alms for the Poor, redesign, sort of a new way of iterating what is kind of a weird way of phrasing take card from the leader. But, very standard move. You see it across many scenarios and expansions. Good card to have.
Number 8, Gregor. Assign Knight to building. You may discard one of your face-up knight cards to either build a settlement for 1 lumber plus 1 brick, or build a city for 2 ore plus 1 grain. So Gregor is the new Vincent, and I think Gregor is definitely one of the cards that's best to have late in game.
Agreed.
Because the fact that you have to discard a played knight means you've already had to buy one, use one, and have it sitting there. So it's not a good card to have early game if you haven't bought any dev cards, because you haven't bought any dev cards, you can't use Gregor.
It's also a terrible card to have. If you've only played one knight card, you don't think you're in with a chance for largest army, but you have Gregor. So you decide to discard that knight card in order to use his action, but then you forget to get rid of Gregor and you're just stuck with him for ages and you don't get the resources in order to buy another knight card. So you're left with nothing to do. You're left with nothing to do, which is not how I played our first game.
That was a fun game.
Helpers. We all had a great time. Card number 9, Stina, 2-1, Trade Frenzy. Choose one type of resource and exchange it at a ratio of 2-1 as much as you like, all at once. This is different.
Yes.
This is a change because I know how we would have played it with the old version, Gene, or with the C&K equivalent, Merchant Fleet, is that you can exchange or trade your cards at a rate of 2 to 1
for your turn.
For your turn. So it's fine. It's trade, build, settle in that order.
Yeah. So like with Gene and Merchant Fleet, it was like having a port for your whole turn. Where now with Stina, which is probably the most controversial change in the rule, is that your trade is that one-time trade. Mm-hmm. So it's like having a one-time use port. It's definitely the most controversial rule change.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Hashtag bring back Gene.
That I don't know needed to be done, but for whatever reason, they needed to clarify it for some reason.
It encourages a tiny bit more strategy in playing Stina, and it encourages you to either flip her or ditch her, which is the nature of helpers.
Card number 10, Deeker. Chase robber to desert. Before or after resolving the production on your roll, you may move the robber to the desert. Receive 1 resource of the type produced in the terrain hex that the robber left. So Deeker is a great card to use defensively. If the robber's been on you for a while, it's like a night card.
Yeah, it's like a night plus.
So you can get the resource from the hex that it left. So it's a really good one. It's the new Lyn, but with the new helpers, they've kind of split the card in half. So Lyn also is kind of half with the next card. Card 11, Catcha. Take the robber's resource. Take 1 resource from the supply matching the hex that the robber occupies. The desert gives a resource of your choice. So it's similar again to the old Lyn. Mm-hmm. And so the two of them working together are really well. So if you used Deegor to get rid of the robber from your hex, switch Deegor then for Catcha. Then on your next turn, use Catcha then to get a resource where the desert is, because then you get a resource of your choice. It's in 2 turns a great way of getting potentially 4 cards if the dice goes with you.
Absolutely. And if the helpers go with you as well, they kind of need to be both available and shuffled into that specific game.
True.
This is just, this whole video I feel is just me being like, play the variant where you play with all the helpers. That's the most fun way to play it. But no, it was a good idea to split Lyn up because like you said, it allows for that extra little bit of strategy and it extends it. We now have 12 helpers cards as opposed to 10. Speaking of. Card number 12, Carla, development card swap. You may place 1 of your unplayed development cards at the bottom of the development card stack and draw 1 from the top.
So this is the brand new card.
Yeah, interesting.
New recruit.
I guess really useful if maybe you are gunning for largest army and you've picked up mono, year of plenty, etc. I can't see anybody using this to get rid of a victory point card.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you imagine?
But definitely, yes, if you've got cards, But then also the thing it says as well is you can use your unplayed one. So it's not similar to Gregor where it's a played knight. Mm-hmm. It's one that's unplayed. So you can kind of, if you've got a few cards in hand, you can kind of play some mind games because everyone's looking at, you've got 3 cards, but then suddenly you're swapping and changing cards, you're putting cards back, taking new ones. No one know what you have. So that's a great one to keep them guessing.
That's such a good point. I never thought of that as well. Just manipulate them. Yeah. Very, very good. You're actually just throwing back and picking up the same night cards over and over again. So those are the new helpers. And we actually played our first game with these guys just a few weeks ago using a very special board, which but you may not know that you know it. Phil had the great idea of recreating the map from the back of the resource cards in base Catan.
Yeah, no, it was a big board. It had like 50-something hexes on it. Mm-hmm. It was pretty big. It was great, though. It was so much fun.
We thought it would take ages because of how the resources were clustered. So we used helpers as a way of speeding it up. And to be perfectly frank, it ended up being just like the length of a normal game. We were definitely playing for less than an hour. Most of that I had with Gregor. Not that I'm bitter at all. The other interesting thing about that game was that it was our 100th weekly games.
Our 100th Friday night game since
the start of the coronament, as we called it. Do you remember who won that game, actually?
Kevin.
Oh.
Of course he did.
Yeah, he's not here, so you don't need to know who he is or how he won.
So thoughts on the new cards?
So I like the redesign because, as we mentioned earlier, hotter. But I also like the uniformity and clarification, particularly with the actions or titles. Yeah. Like, we've often slagged off Hilda and Vincent in the old version.
Swords to plowshares and arms for the poor.
What the fuck is Swords for Plowshares?
Like, they're grand titles, but the fact that none of the other cards have titles where, you know, you have Alms for the Poor and then Build a Road. So, like, they're one is descriptive, one is a title. So, no, it's better the new cards having just names. Trading Frenzy, Assign Knight to Building, Chase Robber to Desert. They're self-explanatory, easy to read. You know exactly what they're meant to do.
Admittedly, the old ones, you know, they add a little bit of flair. Look, I'm not completely ignorant. I did Google Swords to Plowshares. But I do like how it's just a tiny bit more understandable and it makes it more accessible to new players.
Definitely. And the artwork as well is really nice. The artwork definitely got a step up.
Hotter.
Yeah, the artwork is good. And because they're all new people as well, with Thorolf and Hogany, so these are all people that are in Klaus's new first of trilogy novels from Catan.
Yeah.
So they're based around Diger, Thorolf and Yngvi or is it Ryan? 3 of them anyway are stepbrothers who are chased out of their land and they go over to Catan. They find the land of Catan and settle there, and it's their adventures and stuff. So I'm guessing Game of Thrones-y kind of style, but especially since Thorolf just looks like Jon Snow.
Yeah, no, totally. They are the spit.
But it's definitely... So looking forward to that book. It's only in German at the moment, so it's not released in English yet. So, but soon enough, I'm sure. But, you know, very cool that he's kind of bringing it all together. So everyone that we read in the books, we see in the app, we see on the helpers, all the same people. So when we played our games, we played with the variant where we had all the Catan helpers on the board at the same time. Mainly because it's how we always played, but also we hadn't seen the new suggested way of playing by getting rid of certain cards before you start.
That's a really nice way of saying we did not read the rule book before we played.
We skimmed the rule book.
Yeah,
but
we skim-seed.
But definitely, I think the way they suggest at the start is a great way of playing it. By always having certain people missing from the game brings way more variety to it. Because Absolutely. I know when we used to play it, we would always go for Diarra or Candemir, which is the most powerful card, but we'd always go for that. But then with the new way of playing it, some games mightn't have Diarra in it, which forces you to switch up your play style.
Yes, switch it up by going for Hilda all the time.
And there's Helpers, which we definitely recommend. It looks great, it plays really well, and God forbid you're sick of the base game, this is the perfect shot in the arm that you need to get you back into Catan.
And also a note on affordability. Helpers retails over here at least for about €15. And like we said, this is almost a stepping stone to C&K, which retails at about €60. So for like, what's that, a quarter of the price, you're getting an excellent stepping stone with lots of replayability. Like, I am one of those people that thinks board games are really expensive these days. Yeah, hugely.
Big time, getting so expensive.
So to get a scenario that has a decent price point and adds a lot is just very difficult to argue with.
And with that, thanks so much for watching.
Until next time, bye.
Yes, that's exactly the first time I said it. Having a semi-wood in hand.
Yeah. Okay, can't believe we made so many of those and that was our first wood dick joke.